Good morning, everybody. I'm going to spend just a little bit of time about what's coming up here in Module 3. The study of authentic text is going to lead us into better drafting. And the drafting is over time, because we're talking about developmental writing. It's a year-long approach to things. It's not just 1 week or 1 unit. Whatever we study is going to involve drafting lots of sketch-like kinds of approaches to things. And that's what I want you to do this week with your mashup of game cards and cereal boxes, is to just do something that looks and feels like, okay, I think I kind of know what's going on with game cards. I think I know what's going on with cereal boxes. And I want to see what happens if I try to put those two worlds together. So I've asked you to try perhaps using a tool like Canva, which will allow you to take some of the images and things and kind of put it together in Photoshop fashion. It's, I believe that's one of the tools that you learned about in the summer course, the New Literacies course. And free accounts on canva.com. I've put some links in there for you to look at for that. Look for that assignment in there, but the principles behind it are here, which is that the study of the type of authentic text is going to lead us to that sense of purpose, the sense of audiences that people have for that type of text. And that's when we can start saying, well, I'd like to try that on. I'd like to see what it feels like to do some of that. And then the mashup idea is just something that takes it just beyond the mere functional copying approach to things and adds just a little bit of a level of novelty and creativity to it, to say what would happen if these two worlds came together. When you start doing a lot of these kinds of things over time, what you get, by the middle of the year is you have this big portfolio of ideas, things that you've tried on, things that you've tried out, that you can really start thinking about, well, what would you like to do? Which one of these things that you've looked at over the past few months would you really like to work on and strengthen it and make it a more polished piece? And then you dig in further to the idea of real purposes and real audiences, organizing your class to become a group of people who is presenting their writing to each other and sharing it with each other on a regular basis, but also going beyond your classroom, out to other classes in the school, getting parents to come in and look at and be audiences for this text and so on. So I'm just going to put this back here and just talk a little bit about that some more. I showed you last week some of my collection of things, lots of different types of authentic text that we can start collecting in our classrooms. And I have that question still going on for you. Is your classroom library deep enough and wide enough to support kids as writers? Because if you're going to get those authentic texts and use them for writing, you've got to have more than most of us are likely to have in our classroom library. And so I've asked you to start doing that, collecting yourself. And in this week, week 1, I want you to take one of those 5 items that you decided you were going to use to flesh out your classroom library. And the first one that you pick, I want to be one that you think out of these 5, this is the one that I think I'd like to do a study on first, because that's going to be coming up in the next week. Is that once you've collected those items, I'm going to ask you to do a deeper study on them. As we mentioned last week, if you think that seed packets are one thing that you'd like to bring a lot of into your classroom, do it. Go out and get as many different kinds as you can. Eventually you're going to pull that out and study it. So we'll talk a little bit more about that next week, but I'm just going to emphasize a few things that Mowing Seeds did with their seed packets that appeal to audiences and purposes. One of the things that they've done is they've actually used illustrations rather than photographs. And they've got these old-timey looking banners and borders, the graphic design here, and all of their seed packets are this kind of yellowed background. And they're going for this sort of nostalgic old-timey feel, which is that they want you to feel like you're going to be accessing the goodness of your ancestors, that kind of thing, by participating in their version of growing a garden. And ultimately, why do people do that? Why do people appeal to nostalgia? There's just some interesting things that are going on there. They're trying to convince us of something, right? And everything that they're doing, if you read the text, everything that they're doing here is they're trying to convince you that if you use their seeds and grow gardens from their organic seed company, that you're going to be a good person. That the nostalgia, the appeal to old-timiness, all of the appeals here in the text to nutrition, the earthiness of gardens, the vitamins, and you can see some of that here. And then a little description down here at the bottom of the company, Mowing Seeds, and what they do. So there are all sorts of things in here that are serving a really particular purpose, trying to create a niche and help us think and feel something about this company compared to some of the other companies that are out there. So I enjoy doing a study of seed packets with kids, and figuring out how we can do our own seed packets is a whole other thing. Do we do imaginary vegetables and fruits that we can grow? Do we do like we were doing with the Pokemon, with the game cards and the cereal boxes? Do we do some kind of a mashup with them? Or do we just go straight literal and say, we're going to do seed packets because we're going to be planting a garden in the spring and we're going to be looking at a lot of seed packets? Same thing holds true. If I were looking at getting more death certificates into my classroom, and I was thinking, yeah, this is the one I want to pick for next week, I would begin by thinking about, what is there to study here? And for me, in working with death certificates over time, it's always a combination of really specific elements that end up actually making a story rather than just a document here. Usually I start with the cause of death. Then I go to some of the background of the person that's available on the death certificate. It shows who their parents are, where their parents came from. It gives an occupation. And then you've got the time of death, the date of death, and some of the other things, burial, all of the other things that go into kind of creating a sense of story here. And in some death certificates, there's more of a story than for others. But to give this idea that there's the backbone of a story is being laid out with a death certificate. If somebody's looking at this, they're looking at it to learn something about a person who has passed on. So there's a study to be done there. How is it formatted? How is it laid out? How can you emphasize the things that you would want to emphasize if you were making your own death certificate? There are all sorts of authentic texts out there that we haven't talked about. I have had interesting times doing professional development with schools, just talking about what you could do if you brought in prescription medicine labels and over-the-counter medicine labels as authentic text, because there's a lot of print there and a lot of authentic reasons for presenting that stuff to people. Let's see. So the whole business with asking you to do a mashup of these two types of text is partly to just give us a practice round that we can do together, because I'm going to ask you again over the next few weeks to go pick out your own. Are you going to pick restaurant menus? Are you going to pick gravestones? What's the first one out of your 5 pieces of authentic text for building your classroom library that you're going to select to collect more of this week? So if you were going out and collecting restaurant menus, where are you going to go and get those? How are you going to find them? Are you going to go the easy route and just print out the online menu? Or are you going to go to some restaurants and say, hey, can I have a copy of this for my classroom? We're studying menus. I like the latter approach a little bit better because it gets you kind of engaged with the community. And moreover, are you going to get your kids involved with you? If you're actually going to do this study over the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, are you going to have your kids primed for you and say, if you guys go out to a restaurant and you see a decent menu, see if you can get a copy and bring it back to me. So getting colleagues, friends, and students involved with the collection piece creates a different kind of classroom community where people are constantly hustling up this idea of what's the real text that's around us in the world. So that keeps us really strongly in that idea of constant rehearsal and drafting, which is necessary for a year-long writer's workshop. So I'm going to ask you to just continue by doing this as sort of a practice thing. What's going to happen when you bring these two worlds together, and then also to make your selections for what are you going to dig in more deeply on your own. That's going to be less of a let's do a practice one together, and more of here's what I would really like to be working on with me and my students. Okay, I'll post another quick video in just a little while about feedback on the discussion boards, and I'll talk to you later.